See, this was what I was trying to tell. Like when we start talking about pressure inside the airway, outside the airway, etc., most of the airways are considered to be inside. So pressure inside, like the equal pressure point when we discuss, when you have to take the gradient, it should be the pressure inside the airway minus pressure immediately outside the lungs would be in between the space, and that's the intrapleural space. Because when I draw it like this, no? So it's a bit confusing, like this part coming out. So then you wonder what's inside and outside. So inside has to be in the airway and outside has to be the pleural cavity. I was looking at a question. Let's see. Okay, what is this? Hypoosmotic volume contraction. Water shift? I'm hearing both. ECF osmolarity has decreased. So does it drag or give water? Give. So it moves towards ICF. So now to resuscitate this patient, they were asking like what solution would you like to give? Contraction, so you have to give some solution. Because the osmolarity is less, you would like to give which type of solution? Hyperosmotic solution or hypertonic solution. So in the answer choice it was isotonic, hypotonic, so that you rule out. Then you're left with hypertonic solution, but there were two choices: sodium chloride and hypertonic infusion of some plasma proteins. Say albumin they have mentioned. So which one do you prefer? Sodium chloride. Why? Because proteins don't penetrate the capillary walls. So it is not a good particle. So the best solution you would like to use would be the hypertonic sodium chloride solution. Good. I was just trying to test. We are in respiratory, but you have to get to think all round now. It's not slide by slide where you're focusing. So that's why do questions randomly. Select two systems together. That will randomize you the questions on the Q bank and try to do it at like together. Okay. What happened to Cameron? He's coming back. Okay, let's, because hope you didn't think it's till 9. We left early. Okay, my pen is working. I'm handicapped without that. So let's see, where did we stop? We were doing the general topics. We discussed Fick's law of diffusion is directly proportional to pressure gradient, surface area, and distance or thickness. So give me disease where surface area is destroyed, emphysema, so diffusion will be less. You told me bronchial asthma, gradient will be less, so diffusion will be less. Give me a physiological situation where gradient is decreased. When will the pressures decrease? When we go high up, so at high altitude. Diseases where thickness have increased. Fibrosis. What's the other one? Pneumonic consolidation, where the alveoli gets filled with inflammatory exudates, fluid, cells, etc., proteins. So because of it, there is hardening or thickening, and that is called as consolidation, where the thickness will increase. Distance increases. Pulmonary edema. So pulmonary edema is accumulation of fluid between the alveoli and capillary. So gas has to travel more distance. If distance increases or thickness increases, net rate of diffusion decrease. Which was a disease we told can give rise to pulmonary edema? Neonatal respiratory distress syndrome. Tell me about it. Who is prone? Premature babies. Generally, surfactant secretion happens between 28 to 35 weeks of gestation. So if a baby is born much before that, they might be at risk. What is surfactant? Chemical nature. Dipalmitoyl phosphatidylcholine, which is a mixture of apoproteins and phospholipids. And what does it do to the surface tension? Decrease by interfering with the molecular interaction of water molecules. Therefore, what does it do to the alveolar compliance? If tension on the surface is less, will your alveoli expand or not? Expand. So what does it do to the alveolar compliance? Increases. But in neonatal respiratory distress, surfactant is less, therefore surface tension will increase. Therefore, what happens to the alveolar compliance? Decreases and it will collapse. Because surfactant increases alveolar compliance, normally what does it do? It helps the lungs to expand. What will happen to the pulmonary capillaries in that process? When all the alveoli, their surface tension is less, they are very compliant. So when they are compliant, they are expanding. What happens to the capillaries? They get slightly compressed. So what will happen to the hydrostatic pressure? Let me draw this again. So surfactant, what did you tell me? It reduces the surface tension. Therefore, what will it do to the alveoli? It will expand it. Alveolar compliance will increase. So if alveolar compliance increases, it can cause compression of the surrounding capillaries. Therefore, if there's compression of surrounding capillaries, what will happen to blood entering? Less. So obviously, what should happen to the hydrostatic pressure? Decreases. So what does surfactant indirectly do? Decreases the hydrostatic pressure. So if surfactant is less, compliance will be less, surface tension will be higher, so compliance will be lesser. That compression is not there. Therefore, what can happen to the hydrostatic pressure? Increase. And that can cause filtration of fluid into the space, and that results in pulmonary edema. Okay, that's about surfactant, neonatal respiratory distress syndrome. And to monitor the surfactant levels, we measure lecithin sphingomyelin ratio more than 2:1. So that indicates mature surfactant levels. What's the other name for it? Hyaline membrane disease, because it resembles hyaline cartilage histologically. What's Laplace law? P is equal to 2T over R. Decreased radius will increase the collapsing pressure. Therefore, small alveoli have tendency to collapse, but do they collapse normally? No, because thanks to the surfactant, what will happen to surface tension as well? 2T will decrease, therefore collapsing tendency will decrease. But in the absence of surfactant, then they will collapse. Fick's law of diffusion is directly proportional, states that diffusion is directly proportional to the gradient. Which condition you think the gradient will increase? Less gas, less gradient. So what should happen? When will the gradient increase? When there is, pardon me, more gas. So if you give high pressure oxygen, and when do you give that? If somebody is not able to breathe spontaneously, then we have to assist them. So in any form of assisted ventilation, you're intubating, mechanical intubation. So what happens when you do mechanical intubation? You intubate the patient and deliver oxygen at high pressure. So what will happen to partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli? It will start increasing. Therefore, what will happen to the pressure gradient? Increase. Therefore, what will happen to the net rate of diffusion? Increase. Therefore, what will happen to oxygen? Delivery to the blood? Increase. CO2 will decrease. But can you go on giving this mechanical ventilation, assisted ventilation? You can't give 100% oxygen forever. Why? Too much oxygen will be generated, and that can cause oxidative damage, oxidative stress. Plus, if CO2 decreases, what can happen to the pH? Alkaline. So it can predispose to respiratory alkalosis. Okay, so that's happening during, or which condition can increase diffusion? When you increase the pressure. How can you increase the pressure? By delivering more gas. And when do we come across such situation? In a patient who cannot breathe spontaneously and who is getting assisted or mechanical ventilation. So when I do acid-base, I talk about this again. That is one of the causes for respiratory alkalosis. Next, we did dead space. If I ask you to comment on gas values, which ventilation rate is better? Rate of alveolar ventilation. Total or minute ventilation means air going in and out per minute. But alveolar ventilation is reaching the alveoli. So what's the formula? Tidal volume, but you have to subtract the part which has no alveoli, that's dead space. It's a rate, respiratory rate. A versus B, tidal volume times, this is respiratory rate, 600 ml, 400 ml, 10 per minute, 20 per minute. So solve that. So how much is this? 600 minus 150 times 10. How much is it? 4500 ml per minute. B would be 400 minus 150 times 20. How much is it? 400 minus 150 is how much? 250 times 20. 25 2 is 50. So that will be 5000 ml per minute. If I have given you only the tidal volume, you okay? You can't see it. Okay, at the bottom. Okay. So if I have given you only the tidal volume, one person has 600, other one has 200. So who is better, 600 or 200? 600 is better, because what is that 600 person doing? He's breathing deeply compared to the 200 guy. But when the rate has to be accounted, you can't really assume, because when you look at the values, your 600 look better, right? So you can't blindly tell. You have to calculate, because actually which value was more? The second one, the 400 value was more, because it has to be accounted with the rate. So best way is to calculate. So when you calculate, which one had more air? Person B had more air, therefore B will have more oxygen. CO2 will be decreased. If CO2 is decreased, what will happen to H plus? Decreased. That means what will happen to pH? Alkaline. A has less air, less oxygen, more CO2. More CO2 means more H plus. That means what happens to pH? Acidic. So pH and CO2 are inverse. Higher the pH, acidic, less pH. Higher the CO2, acidic pH, less. Lesser the CO2, alkaline, higher pH.
On the exam, so since that's the equation for rate of alveolar ventilation, if you were to happen to give us CO2 values, would we then calculate the physiological dead space?
Correct.
And then do that?
Yes. I've given you one practice question like that. Suppose I've given you information for PaCO2, PeCO2, then there's a purpose I've given you that. That means apart from the dead space, anatomic dead space, person had some extra dead space. So what you should do, you should first calculate the physiologic dead space using this and then substitute that value here. I've given you one practice question, but generally we try to make the calculation problems shorter. So here I would just assume that dead space would be 150. But shell for step, we never know. So if they have given you information about PaCO2, PeCO2, you calculate the dead space first and use that value for this formula. Yeah, welcome. That was about dead space. Next, what's the relationship between carbon dioxide partial pressure and the production of carbon dioxide? Higher the production, more will dissolve. So what should happen to the partial pressure as well? It will increase. So they are directly related. What's the relationship with ventilation? Alveolar ventilation, inverse. So as you ventilate more, what will happen to your CO2? It should decrease. So during exercise, you generate more CO2, but at the same time, how are you breathing? Why? Because CO2 can directly stimulate your respiratory center. We'll talk about it later. Or another way to remember is when you're running, your joint muscle receptors are activated, which will stimulate your centers. Therefore, they increase proportionately and cancel each other. And what will happen to the PaCO2 value? It remains at 40 millimeter mercury. So there is no issue. At rest, you ignore this because this will be constant. So you just apply PaCO2 is inversely related to ventilation. So if initial CO2 is 90 millimeter mercury, person increased ventilation 3 folds, what should happen to CO2? Ventilation has increased, so CO2 should decrease. And what will be the new value? Decrease by how much? By the same factor. So 90 divided by 3. So what will be the new partial pressure? 30 millimeter mercury. Comment on oxygen. You increase the ventilation. So what should happen to oxygen? Should increase by how much? 30 is the new value for PaCO2. So don't tell 30. You have to see by how much did it decrease. So from 90, it decreased to 30. So this decreased by how many millimeter? 60. So what should happen to oxygen? It should increase by 60. If question has no further information, you stop at this. Oxygen should increase by 60. But if I told initial oxygen is at 40, then what will be the new partial pressure of oxygen? From 40, it will increase by 60. So what will be the new value of oxygen? 100. So depends on what is given to you on the question. Either you comment what has happened to oxygen, how much it has increased by or decreased, or if you have the original value, calculate and give it. Is that clear? If it's a fraction, then what will you do? PaCO2 is inversely related to ventilation. So if I'm telling you initial CO2 is, say, 30, person has bronchial asthma, ventilation decreased to 1/3 its original value. So what should happen to CO2? Should increase by that factor. So 30, when you divide it by 1/3, you flip it over. So 30 times 3 would be 90 millimeter mercury. So CO2 will increase to 90. That means it increases by 60 millimeter mercury. Therefore, what should happen to oxygen? Decreased by 60 millimeter mercury. Okay, so if I've given you original value as 100, what will be the new value? 40 millimeter mercury. This is for oxygen. Is that clear? So that's the best we can do. Like, take numbers and just test yourself whether you can do these questions. Next. What's this? Air moving in and out with each normal breath. Tidal volume. What muscle did we use? Diaphragm. Inspiration. Expiration is not requiring muscle, but is tidal volume muscle dependent? Yes, because even though expiration does not use muscle, it's reflected by inspiration. So this would be muscle dependent. It requires muscles, because if inspiration is less, then obviously expiration will be affected. Air which I take beyond your tidal inspiration using effort, that would be inspiratory reserve. Your tidal expiration stopped here. So whatever I can expire forcibly beyond your tidal expiration would be expiratory reserve. Even after forceful expiration which stopped here, your air never goes to zero. You always have air remaining. That would be residual volume. So for IRV, which muscle did you use? Inspiratory accessory muscles. Scalenus, sternocleidomastoids, external intercostals. ERV,
Your abdominal.
abdominal and internal intercostals. During inspiration, what is the two movements of the chest wall? What increases anterior-posterior diameter? This way, no? What was moving this way? Front. Bucket or the pump? Pump. So that is pump handle. What increases transverse diameter? The bucket. Okay, that moves sideways. What prevents collapse? The residual volume. What's my total capacity to inspire? Highest to the lowest point of your inspiratory curve. All this way would be inspiratory capacity, and that's given by a sum of IRV and TV. Highest to the lowest point of the expiratory curve, forceful expiration, gives me the forced vital capacity, or simply vital capacity, and that's a sum of IRV, TV, ERV. After a normal expiration, whatever remains in my lungs is the FRC, and FRC is given by sum of ERV and RV. Finally, my total capacity to accommodate air in my lungs following maximum inspiratory effort is total lung capacity, which is the sum of everything. IRV, TV, ERV, RV. So if I give you IC and FRC, what can you calculate? Draw the graph if that works for you. IC is up, FRC is down. So what does it give you? Total lungs. If I have given you IC and ERV, IC is here, ERV is here. So what can you calculate? Forced vital capacity. So these questions, I think when you draw, it's better. You can easily see. Next, what is the equilibrium point? FRC. What's equilibrium point? After a normal expiration, from where you start the next cycle, that would be a point of equilibrium. What cannot be directly measured? That air which never leaves, residual volume, FRC and TLC. How do you measure? Helium dilution. Why helium? Because helium does not dissolve in your blood, so it won't diffuse into the blood. From the container, whatever helium you take will enter the alveoli. So your helium in container will equilibrate with helium in the alveoli. So you know how much of initial helium is present. You subtract the final helium. So if you subtract, you ask the patient to expire forcibly. So after forceful expiration, what does the helium dilution technique measure? Initial minus final after forceful expiration will give you the residual volume. Initial minus final after passive exhalation, that will give you the initial minus final. There's a difference. So where is that difference in helium in the alveoli? So what's the helium retained in the alveoli after passive exhalation giving you FRC? Which disease ERV is less? Obstructive. You're expiring less. What happens to which disease RB increases? You're trapping air. Again, obstructive. FRC and TLC also increases in obstructive. Which disease? Residual volume, FRC and TLC all decrease. Restrictive lung disease. So that's pretty much okay. And which of the only one is not dependent on muscle effort? Tidal volume, I told you, needs. IRV, ERV need muscle. Residual volume. Many of you tell me residual volume. What's the definition of residual volume? Air remaining in my lungs after forced exhalation. And I use muscle for forced exhalation, not that. Answer will be FRC. Because FRC is the air in my lung after a passive recoil, which is independent of muscular effort. Next. Sorry. Thank you. We'll talk about the breathing cycle. So when we talk about breathing, what are the two gradients? One gradient determines movement of air in and out. So that gradient is between the atmosphere and the intra-alveoli. The other gradient will determine whether your lung is expanding or collapsing, and that is called as the transmural gradient. It's a difference in intraalveolar minus intrapleural. So at rest, there's no movement of air. So what happens to your atmospheric and alveoli? They are at equilibrium, they are zero. At rest, your gradient is still positive. So if gradient has to be positive, alveoli is at zero, your intrapleural at rest has to be negative. And what's the starting value? Negative 5 centimeter water. Recoiling force at rest would be minimal because the alveoli are slightly distended. How much is the lung volume? FRC. During inspiration, what's the first sequence of event? Contraction of diaphragm moves down, chest wall moves away. So as chest wall moves away, what happens to degree of separation between the layer of pleurae? They are pulled apart. So what's the first change happening? Intrapleural becomes more negative. If this becomes more negative, what will happen to the transmural pressure gradient? That will become more positive. And if it becomes more positive, it will apply a traction force around the alveoli. So the alveoli will get stretched. And when the alveoli get stretched, there's more volume. Gas molecules collide less frequently. So what will happen to intraalveolar pressure from 0? It drops to subatmospheric -1. Atmosphere is at 0, so that creates a gradient for movement of air. So intraalveolar goes to -1, and that will create the gradient. And what will happen to the lung? It starts expanding. Recoiling force will start increasing. Volume also will start increasing. But it has not yet completed the tidal volume, so just tell it increases. At the end, as the air comes in, they collide again. So as they collide from -1, it goes back to 0. That's when inspiration will stop. Pleurae are close or away at this stage? Inspiration, they are maximally apart. So intrapleural reaches its most negative, transmural gradient becomes most positive. And by now, one full tidal volume has entered, so it will be FRC plus tidal volume. On the exam, you don't have so much time. So if I ask you anything about intraalveoli, it's easy. At rest, no movement of air, so it has to be 0. During inspiration, it's expanding, so the pressure has to be less, -1. At the end, it has to go back to 0. Pleural pressure, if I ask you, at rest, your alveoli are stretched still. That means gradient is positive, intrapleural has to be negative. During inspiration, what's happening to the two layer of pleurae? They are moving away, so it has to be more and more negative. That's it. Lung volume, of course, you know, FRC increases, FRC plus 1 full tidal volume. By the time of end of inspiration, the recoiling force has maximized, and that will take over, and that begins the onset of expiration. Therefore, during expiration, there is recoiling of alveoli, volume decrease. Gas molecules collide vigorously, so intraalveolar from 0 goes to 1 above atmospheric. That causes a reversal of gradient and air goes out. What happens to the two layer of pleurae now? Chest wall, how is it moving now? Downward, inward, pleurae are coming closer. So intrapleural becomes less negative, transmural gradient starts decreasing. As air leaves, volume will decrease. So as the air physically leaves, gas molecules are lesser. So from +1, collision will be less. Gas goes to, the intraalveolar pressure goes back to 0. That will end the expiration. And by then everything else goes back to rest. Lung volume goes back to FRC. So that's pretty much the normal breathing cycle. And if you have to graphically represent it, you have the phases of breathing. This is your inspiration, expiration, end of inspiration and end of expiration. 0 at rest goes to +1, sorry, -1. 0 at rest goes to -1, back to 0, and then +1, back to 0. What is this? 0 at rest, that should be intraalveolar, because intrapleural cannot be 0. Negative becomes more and more negative, less and less negative, and goes back to rest, intrapleural. The gradient in between these two, intraalveolar minus intrapleural, is the transmural gradient. Give me a condition where intrapleural pressure becomes 0. That means it has air in it. So which condition the pleura has air, pleural cavity has air in it? Pneumothorax. So now you know what's going to happen. If the pressure becomes 0, there's no longer any gradient. There's nothing to pull it out. So what will happen to the lung? Collapse. And if the lung collapses, there's nothing to hold the chest wall back. And what will happen to the chest wall? It will spring outward. So that equilibrium would be lost. Give an example for forced expiration. Valsalva maneuver. So when you're doing this maneuver, what are we doing? We are vigorously contracting our diaphragm, intercostals. Chest wall vigorously comes back. Two layer, instead of coming slowly, now come close suddenly. Therefore intrapleural becomes +20. What happens to the alveoli also? Instead of recoiling slowly, it now recoils abruptly. So if it recoils abruptly, there is a sudden loss in volume. Gas molecules collide more vigorously, and intraalveolar becomes way more positive. So we generate a high intraalveolar +35. Therefore, our airway pressure starts from 35 till we reach a point where the two pressures are the same. Airway and pleural pressure becomes equal, and that is called equal pressure, which explains the dynamic compression, because in us it lies along the bronchi. So they won't collapse, it will only compress. And yesterday I've explained to you what happens in patients with COPD and bronchial asthma, etc. So in emphysema, what happens in all these disease, their pleura is fine. So intrapleural will be plus 20 like you and me. But when they do forced expiration, in emphysema, the alveolar recoil is lost. In bronchial asthma and bronchitis, the amount of air coming is less. So if recoil is less or air entering is less, what will happen to the intraalveolar pressure? It depends on air, so that will be less. So instead of 35, they start from 25. As a result, what happens to proportionately all the pressure? If it starts from 25, their equal pressure point reaches earlier at the terminal bronchiole, and the point above that, the gradient becomes negative and it collapses. Due to which all these diseases, they are under obstructive airway disease because they cannot expire the air completely. So residual volume, FRC, total lung capacity, everything will increase, resulting in what deformity? Barrel shaped. What's barrel shaped deformity? Which diameter is greater? Anterior-posterior diameter is greater than transverse. So they may not tell barrel. They may tell patient has a higher anterior-posterior diameter compared to transverse. That indicates it is barrel shaped. How do they cope up? First leg. Because the main aim there is to prevent forced exhalation, to do slow exhalation. As the air leaves the unit, so during expiration, which direction will the equal pressure point shift? Once the expiration starts taking place. Let me draw this once more. So during this became plus 35, so air started going out. Your equal pressure point was somewhere high up. What I'm asking you is, as air physically leaves, the number of gas molecules will become lesser. So this from 35 will start decreasing. So what will happen to all the pressures as well? Decrease. So equal pressure point will shift upward or downward? Downwards towards, that's called distally, towards the alveoli. Okay. Next, compliance. What's the definition? Ability of my lung to distend. So do I want a huge recoiling force to allow it to distend? No. So it's inversely related to recoiling force, and that's exerted by elastic tissue. Lesser the elastic tissue, lesser the recoiling force, it will allow the lungs to expand, compliance will increase. It's calculated as what over what? Volume change per unit change in gradient. So as you subject it to a positive gradient, it will stretch the alveoli. So what will happen to the volume? It will increase. Intraalveolar pressure will decrease. So what will happen to accommodation of more air? It will increase. More and more air starts coming in. How are they arranged, lung and chest wall? Parallel arrangement. So because of that, we can also calculate total compliance. 1 over compliance of lung over plus 1 over compliance of chest wall. That will be, yeah. Once you get the answer, you have to flip it over. Total compliance will be C by 2. Okay. Going to the graph. Now before that, compliance of lung depends on what? The elastic fibers of the lung. Compliance of the chest wall depends on elastic fibers of the chest wall. What's the difference? Elastic fibers of the lung are uniformly arranged, whereas chest wall, they are not uniform. So because of that, what else does the lung depend on? Surfactant. Okay. So what will happen to the lung? During inspiration, the fibers are uniformly pulled outward. Therefore, what happens to the recoiling force of the lungs? It is directed inwards towards a collapsing force. Chest wall fibers are pulled in different directions during inspiration. Therefore, the recoiling direction also is different. Inward, sideward, obliquely, whatever. So in the end, they took the dominant direction of the chest wall. And which direction was the recoiling force of the chest wall? Outward towards an expanding force. They are always in equilibrium, so it is not a problem. Everything is in place. So if lung collapses, there's nothing to hold the chest wall back. It will spring outwards, and as you mentioned, it is seen in pneumothorax. So when you look at the graph, first and foremost, The point of equilibrium is when the volume is at what? FRC. There is no pressure gradient. Intrapleural pressure is at -5 centimeter water. So at this point of equilibrium, if you have to draw the graphs for compliance of your chest wall and the lung, they are equally steep. That means they are almost equal. But what happens when you take total compliance? It is flat. The reason you know, because the number of elastic fibers will be greater. And what's the second reason? Because of the parallel arrangement. Let me take that total compliance graph and just draw the compliance of lung and chest wall. Volume on the Y, and this will be the pressure gradient. At rest it's 0. Lung volume is at FRC. So this will be the point of equilibrium. So at point of equilibrium, there is one arrow going towards the chest wall, which represents recoiling force of the chest wall, and the arrow going towards the lung represents recoiling force of the lung. Chest wall recoiling force is directed outward, so that's why they tell it as an expanding force, and this is towards the collapsing force. What happens during expiration? It's at FRC, so when you do forced expiration, I meant, what will happen to the volume? It will go from FRC to residual volume. So as the volume decreases below the FRC, what has happened to the recoiling force of the lung? It has decreased. What's the reason? Recoiling force depends on stretch. So when you expire, what happens to the alveoli? It's shrinking. So what is happening to the stretch? Less. So what's happening to the recoiling force? Less. During inspiration, your alveoli is expanding. So what happens to the recoiling force of the lung as well? It will increase. So if you want to increase the recoiling force of your lung, you have to stretch it more or less? More. So if you want to increase recoiling force of your lung, you have to keep it more stretched. There should be more air. If you want to decrease the recoiling force, you have to stretch it less. So let's apply this to emphysema and fibrosis. In emphysema, we already know what's the problem. Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, elastase activity increases, elastic tissue is less, recoiling force is less. As a result, what will happen to the compliance? Increase. What type of a disease? Obstructive. Therefore, air gets trapped, FRC residual volume, and as a result of that, TLC will also increase. So that's what's happening. But because FRC is increasing, their lungs are hyperinflated. So what will happen to degree of stretch? Initially, what happened to the two arrows in emphysema? What happened to the recoiling force of the lung? It was less compared to the chest wall. The equilibrium was disturbed. Now, somehow you want to increase this recoiling force so that the two arrows come back to equilibrium. So what did I tell you? To increase the recoiling force, we need to keep the lung more stretched. So this guy has increased FRC and residual volume. The lungs are hyperinflated. So what happens to degree of stretch in them compared to you? They have more air, so the alveoli is kept more stretched. So that helps in building up the recoiling force. And finally, what happens to the recoiling forces? They come back to equilibrium. In fibrosis, what's the property of fibrous tissue? It has increased recoiling force, like the thick rubber band. Therefore, what happens to the effective compliance? Decrease. And what disease is it? Restrictive. So because of that, what will happen? They cannot take in, but they give out almost completely. So what will happen to FRC residual volume? Decrease. And as a result of that, TLC is a sum of that, it will decrease. So what happened to the two arrows here? Recoiling force of the lung in fibrosis was greater than the chest wall. Equilibrium was disturbed. Therefore, somehow you want to get these two arrows back to the same distance or height. So what should you do to the recoiling force of the lung? You have to decrease it. So how can you decrease the recoiling force? By stretching it less or more? Take the rubber band. Less. So when you stretch it less, the recoil also will be less. So in fibrosis, the recoiling force is high. You want to decrease the recoiling force. Okay, so you want to keep the alveoli less stretched. And what's going to help? A decreased FRC and residual volume. So in this person versus you have more FRC. Your lung is more stretched. These people, the lung is less stretched. Due to which the recoiling force will decrease, and eventually what happens to the equilibrium of the recoiling forces? They will reach equilibrium. What's this? Restrictive, anything which gives rise to fibrosis. What's this? Old age. If this is normal, then it's a normal phenomenon, physiological phenomenon. But if it is like this, then it has to be emphysema.
I don't be said it already, but what's the treatment form of patient fibrosis? Is there any direct treatment?
For fibrosis, so if it's just a part of the lung, no, you just have to give symptomatic treatment. Because of fibrosis, what happens to the lung? They are very thick, diffusion is affected. So oxygen delivery can help because you're subjecting them to high pressure, which will increase the gradient. But if it is so thick that even the entire diffusion process is getting affected, it may not really help unless you do some surgical intervention. Okay, that part of the lung may have to be resected. Best is to identify the disease earlier. So any person with fever, cough not responding to the standard treatment, they have to be evaluated thoroughly, especially for tuberculosis. So that's one common cause. Occupational, of course, by the time they come to you, they might have been exposed over a period of years, right? So again, it might have widespread fibrosis. So unfortunately, you just have to give in symptomatic treatment to these patients. Okay. So that's about it. What's this? Restrictive. So the expiratory volume in the first second is nearly normal. Peak expiratory flow rate is normal. So that tells you there are not any expiratory difficulty. Why is the ratio greater than 0.8? Because their forced vital capacity is less. They're taking less, so obviously they're giving out less. But in the first second, it's remaining normal. So that means they don't have a major collapse of the airway. So it has to be restrictive. If it is obstructive, how it will be different? The peak expiratory flow rate will be reduced. FEV1 will be reduced. FEC will be reduced, but FEV1 is more reduced compared to FEC. Therefore, what will happen to their FEV1 FEC ratio? Less than 0.8. I'll try to make it approximate because I don't have a scale here. Yes, Jack? In the sense, the normal ratio, you mean? No, you'll have to calculate. You should know what's the normal ratio is 0.8. You'll just get this graph, this one. You have to calculate. So tell me now. FEC is highest to the lowest point of the curve. And how much is that? 2 to 6, that would be 4. FEV1 is, see, that's why I'm telling you, if you take 1 second, doesn't make sense. So you have to identify where expiration has started. First second is somewhere here. So that would be this much, no? This much he expired in the first second. So 2, that would be half, which is 50% or 0.5. And your diagnosis would be obstructive. Differentials would be chronic bronchitis, bronchial asthma, emphysema. What are the history-wise, no? In chronic bronchitis, how can the clinical vignette look? What's the diagnostic criteria for bronchitis? Cough, persistent cough for 3 months, 2 years, like long duration of cough. So that is more likely to be bronchitis due to any irritants, cigarette smoking, pollen, allergens, anything. And which cells are hyperactive in these patients? Goblet cells. So they have lots of mucus also which is secreted. Bronchial asthma, how will you diagnose? Methacholine challenge test. So that's how you calculate the FEV1, FEC. Peak expiratory flow rate on the y-axis, volume on the x. 0 is this end. So you have to read the graph from 0, right? So what does this mean? The point where you start the graph would indicate the expiratory flow rate test. First you have to ask the patient to fill the lungs maximally. So what does this point x indicate? Total lung capacity. Ask him to expire and measure the flow rate. It will peak and somewhere here it starts decreasing. Why did it decrease? Because of dynamic compression. So this is the point where maximum resistance was offered because of dynamic compression. And what's the thing which is responsible for dynamic compression? Equal pressure point. So whatever they ask you, they might ask you where is maximum resistance, or which point is the dynamic compression, or which point is related to the equal pressure point, would be the same. Following that it will decrease, and where will it stop? Forced expiration. So this point has to be residual volume. Graph A would be obstructive. Why? TLC has increased, residual volume has increased, expiratory flow rate is less. B, expiratory flow rate is less than normal but more than the other guy. TLC is decreased, residual volume is decreased. So it has to be restricted. And airways, you know, no? Poiseuille's equation, you tell me, what's the relationship between airflow and resistance? Is directly proportional to gradient, inversely related to resistance. Resistance is inversely related to fourth power of radius. So you give a bronchodilator, radius increases by factor 2. Resistance should decrease by 2 raised to the power 4, 16. If resistance decreases, what should happen to the airflow? It should increase by 16. So such problems you should be able to work out. What's one exception to Poiseuille's equation? Trachea and bronchi versus bronchioles. And you know why, right? What's the reason why trachea and bronchi, though they have large diameter, they offer more resistance? Cartilages and they are more turbulent. Whereas bronchioles, there will be no cartilages, they are more compliant and airflow will be less turbulent. That's pretty much it, 1 through 4. Do you have any questions? Good. Why you're so quiet? You're feeling prepared? This, I give you the concept, you have to learn to apply it. So don't sit relaxing and telling, okay, I know everything, because on the question it's time framed and the questions are not directly. You have to think about the question. So that's why doing questions in physio is important. Okay? So from now on, like you should have done by now, but still go ahead and do more and more of questions. For the exam, no, we want you to come at least 5 to 10 minutes before, because it's time based. When somebody starts taking exam, you walk in, open the soda bottle and it makes a lot of noise. Come here 5 to 10 minutes early, take deep breaths. I told you, that good deep breath is very good to relax you, calm you down. So make sure you're here well in time, and all the best. 40 questions, 57 minutes. Tomorrow we don't have class. For the transfers, I think you're not aware of it. Generally the day before exams, like Friday before your block exams, we don't have classes. Okay. Calculators, I have set it up, but some of you don't like the calculator on the screen. So I don't mind if you get your own calculator, but we don't want scientific. A simple basic calculator we allow, but we do set it up on the exam as well. It's somewhere on the top, there's an icon calculator, so just go and use that. Or if you want to get yours, feel free to. Yes? Nernst equation, no. No log equations are given. They are now not tested, so that's why I didn't even do it. I think your Linda Costanzo gives lots of Nernst equation calculation. Don't worry about it. How can you do it without the log factor, the log scale, right? So it's difficult, we cannot do it. Anything else? Okay, thank you. I'll see you on Monday then.
Will you post a practice quiz?
No, for this what I've done is after every 2 topics I've posted,
Yeah.
and then I gave you a formative quiz on the cell. For respiratory, no. For the next block, I have a formative quiz.
Perfect. All
For
right.
now, I gave you every chapter wise. So maybe you can just put it in one document and take it as a quiz. Okay, yeah, thank you. Because those calculations, no, to put it on formative was a bit difficult. So that's why for the next block, I'll give you.
Sounds good.
Okay.